This is Horns Up. I'm Animesh.
And I'm Peter.
And joining the podcast today is Nikki Brumen, frontwoman and vocalist of Norwegian band Blood Command. How are you doing today, Nikki? Great to have you here.
Good. I'm good. Thank you for having me. All the way from sunny Bergen in Norway.
I mean, honestly, that's not a phrase we hear often, especially on the podcast, a metal podcast.
No, it's really not. It's not a phrase you'd often hear from somebody who lives in Bergen, but it's been sunny and like 25 degrees over the past couple of days. So I think the rain's coming tomorrow, but I'm soaking it up for all it's worth being an Australian. I appreciate the warm weather right now.
Yeah. An Australian living in Norway, that's something that we will be definitely getting into in this conversation. But first, let's start off with the album Praise Armageddonism itself. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It feels like it's, been such a long time coming. So it's so nice to have it finally released to the world. When it came out on the 1st of July, it was just felt like a weight off all of our shoulders just because we had to keep it secret for so long. And then when we announced me as the vocalist of Blood Command, like the new vocalist of Blood Command, we were in the process of recording that album. But the guys in Blood Command had actually written and started recording that album back in 2018. So they were, to say I was ready is one thing, but to say, they were more than ready for it to be released. So it's really nice to have it out to the world now.
You mentioned that it came out on the 1st of July. So, it's been a couple of months almost since its release. How would you evaluate the album in terms of, the reactions from the fans, the critics? Has it been on par with your expectations?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, you never really know how somebody's going to respond to something that you put out. And with this album, I was a little bit nervous because it was the first time I, as an artist, have, done anything really poppy before, because half of the album is quite heavy and the other half is really pop ballads. So I was a little bit nervous about people's response, hearing that side of my voice. But, in saying that, I do music for me. I do this stuff as my own creative outlet, and, having fans and people listen to the music is just the added bonus. Of course, I appreciate people listening to the music more than anything, and people coming to the shows is what keeps the band alive. But people's opinions of it don't really matter to me. I just want the band to be happy, and I want to be proud of myself and the work I put in. So I've been really proud of myself. And, the reaction to the album has just been an added bonus because people have really loved it. There's been a few people I think who have been pretty surprised by how jarring it is from going really heavy to really pop. But I love that. I think that that's what makes it super Blood Command sounding. And I think, that's the really clever thing about this record and sets it apart from other bands right now. There's no one like Blood Command, and that kind of aspect really enhances the Blood Command sound.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly the point that drew me into this album, and also becomes the first kind of thing that you talk about while discussing this album, because the versatility and dynamics, it's such a refreshing listen, because the album zags when you expect it to zig as such. On the other hand, Peter, I remember discussing this with him, he found the album confusing. That's the exact
Guilty.
word he used on this first listen, and eventually it grew on him as in subsequent listens. Is there a particular reaction that the band was looking to create as such with each song?
I think the main thing, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ingvar because he wrote this record. I think he just wanted it to be the most Blood Command sounding record, and in order to do that, he wanted to make the pop songs more pop and the heavier songs more heavy, and then sort of have that through line of us against the rest of the world, with the band and we call our fans our awake team, and that's kind of a little bit of a running theme as well through the record. There's other themes that come up, but so I think when he wrote it, he wasn't really like wanting to, get any sort of reaction from anybody. He was really writing it for himself and what he thought were the best songs. And the first time I heard that record was when the previous singer, her vocals were actually on it. It had already been recorded in its entirety and mastered with the previous singer before she was, before she was left or asked to leave the band, however people want to look at that situation. So when I joined, I also got to hear the album like in its entirety, which is a really unique situation because I'm a songwriter. I've always written my own lyrics, and I thought it was just genius when I first heard it. I didn't get any sort of sense of confusion, as you did, which is such a fair response if that's how you feel. I totally understood it. I understood that it, was going for that death pop vibe, and it did it so perfectly. And every feeling that was conjured up in me the first time I heard it, I still feel those feelings every time I hear one of the songs now. And I was able to use that when I was recording as well. I found the songs really relatable, and that's the sign of a good songwriter.
So I feel I need to chime in here. And the reason I say confusing, right? Because I didn't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Am I supposed to be like headbang along, or am I supposed to sing along? It's just like it sends all these different signs to your brain at the same time. Because let's be honest, right? I mean, like, you're not used to metal having hooks, right? I'll give you a parallel example I had the first time. Have you heard of the artist The Algorithm?
I'm not too sure, actually.
So it's René from France, and it's basically electronica music, but for metalheads. That's how I would put it. And it's the same thing. It's like, you don't know, right? Like, does this fit in on like a metal stage where everyone can kind of chill out in the middle, or does this also seamlessly fit in on a dance floor at the end of a club gig or winding down, that kind of thing, right? So it's got that energy level, and it also has got that.
Yeah, I love that. That's your perception of it, because a really weird thing about that as well is that before Blood Command, I was in a Melbourne-based hardcore band called Pagan, and that's why I was asked to join Blood Command, because Pagan split up, and we had the exact same reaction as what you're saying right now about Praise Armageddonism and about the example you just gave for The Algorithm. We had that exact same reaction all the time with Pagan, and I think there's something really what's the word? It's kind of like fate that I've ended up in another
it's so poetic.
Like, gets the same response, because people would always say to me, they go, "What style of music is Pagan?" And I'd go, "Well, it's kind of rock and roll, but it's kind of hardcore, but it's kind of has a little black metal blast beat." So it kind of like, I could never pinpoint what it was, and people would get really confused by that sometimes. And a lot of the time they'd come to the live show and then they'd sort of finally understand it. But as an artist, I kind of find it a compliment that people think like that, because it sets us apart.
Definitely.
And I don't want to fit in, and I don't care about things not making sense, because I think there's something really unique about it when it comes down to like your response. Like, I think that's a really cool response to have.
No, and I'll be honest, right? I'd completely agree with you. It's a compliment, because like in 2022, if you're asking what's a metal band, and you cannot say what genre, or you cannot kind of pigeonhole Blood Command, then that's a great thing, I feel, right?
Yeah.
Definitely death pop helps in SEO.
Oh yeah, that also.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'd like to just riff with you a bit about stepping into the huge shoes of Karina, right? That's the previous vocalist you mentioned,
Yes.
and that too after a lot of the album was written. Just to get the facts straight, have you penned any lyrics for this album?
Have I written any of the lyrics?
Any of the lyrics on this album?
No, I've not. I didn't write any of the lyrics because, as I said before, the album was already written and recorded by Ingvar. He was the primary songwriter. He was always the songwriter for every Blood Command song, including the lyrics. But Ingvar and I, over winter, when I first met my band, I flew.
Winter for whom?
Pardon?
Winter for Norway or winter for Australia?
Oh, sorry, winter in Norway. So November 2021.
Which is your summer.
Which is summer for Australia, right?
Yeah. It was turning into summer for Australia. I headed to Bergen for the very first. Well, I'd been to Bergen 10 years previously, just on holiday. And then fast forward 10 years later, I'm going to Bergen again to meet my band for the first time. We'd already recorded the whole of Praise Armageddonism during lockdown. So I was actually in Australia being produced by Ingvar over Skype sessions with an engineer, like in the room next to me. And I was meeting my band for the first time, and Ingvar and I, during that time, because we were supposed to tour with Kvalitak, Norway's,
of course,
guitar band. We were meant to go on like 36 show tour or something, but there was that sort of second wave or 100th wave of lockdown. So the shows got rescheduled, and during that time, Ingvar and I were actually able to write a lot of new material, which has resulted in me actually co-writing the lyrics with him. So, which has been really good for both of us. Number one, because neither of us have ever written with anybody else, and we write really well together. And number two, one of the biggest challenges for me with Praise Armageddonism was that they weren't my lyrics.
Yeah.
And I am a songwriter. I don't want to sing someone else's words. I want to sing my own words. And
just to play on that a little bit more, what's it like to sing and perform words that aren't yours? Is it more similar to performing a cover, or is it like being an actor where you have to make the words yours?
It's a good question. I studied acting for 3 years in my early 20s. In Australia, I'm a sometimes actor. I do TV commercials and things, but I don't do that so much anymore. So I was actually able to use some of my performance techniques that I learned in acting school when I was going into the recording studio, like really tapping into what the meanings were behind the songs and using that emotion when I was singing them. But for me, I've always been a fan of Blood Command, even before I joined, and I love Ingvar's lyrics. So I found them just really, and I find them really relatable. So I don't really need to even try to relate to them. I find my own meaning behind them, whether or not that's what he intended. And especially when I was recording Praise Armageddonism, I'd had a few hard things happen in my life in a short time frame, and I used those emotions when I was recording. And yeah, as I said, it may not have been his message behind the words, but for me as a singer, I have to mean what I'm saying. So I had to find a way to relate to the words. And luckily, I'm a performer as well in acting. So I found it really, really easy to relate to the lyrics, like way more easy than I ever would have thought it could be.
And I think that's the beautiful part about music, right? I mean, like, I always think about it in terms of listening to music in other languages, right? Even though you may not understand the exact lyrics or the emotions and stuff like that, but overall you still connect with it, right? And I
Yeah,
think that's the thing
absolutely.
that's really beautiful. But before I go on, you said Velatak and Blood Command, sign me up for that tour. I'd love to watch a gig like that. I mean, Velatak are easily one of my favorite bands.
Already. Oh, we already finished the tour already, unfortunately.
Damn.
But next time, hopefully.
For sure. That's like absolutely crazy. But I just want to go back to something that you said earlier, right? And I read that you in an interview that you'd already spoken about that, saying how similar the lyrics were in Blood Command to the ones you were writing in Pagan.
Yeah.
Could you give us an insight into some of these sessions that you and Ingvar have had in terms of new ideas, new material?
Yeah. We both
don't spill the beans, obviously.
No, I can't, and I can't say what it is that we've recorded, obviously, but we've done many months of writing, and we both have a really similar approach to songwriting in firstly like what we want to say, but also like the use of metaphor. We're very similar with what sort of, we like in terms of like using certain words or phrases, or like maybe using like a reference to like a famous book or a movie or something. Like we both have like a similar mindset on like where we draw metaphor from. Sure. And something really strange that really stuck with me when I first heard Praise Armageddonism was when I was in Pagan. We only released one album and then we split up, and the album was called the album was called Blackwash, and it was like a metaphor for this like make-believe cult called the Church of Blackwash that I invented like this through line through the entire record. And Ingvar has done similar things in like with Praise Armageddonism. There's a few references to the religious group Heaven's Gate, and that kind of metaphor is used throughout, our record now in Praise Armageddonism. And I found it really strange that we both used, for lack of a better word, cult references. I know that Heaven's Gate don't refer to themselves as a cult, so don't want to offend anyone. They're religious movement, but just to explain myself a bit better, we both used those references. We never met each other. We'd both written the records probably around the same time, because he started writing this in 2018, and that was around the time that Blackwash was released. And yeah, I found it really another strange, thing that feels again like it's fate that I was asked to join Blood Command. Like there's so many weird coincidences that it just feels like it's meant to be. I've never found myself as somebody who would write with somebody else, and how easy it was with the first night we sat down and started writing. It just worked. And it's so rare that it would work that easily, let alone someone I'd never met face to face until like 2 weeks prior to that songwriting session. So it's pretty special and pretty unique, I think.
Okay, so now that you've kind of put this out there, we will have new Blood Command music sooner than later. But having said that, right, would you consider Praise Armageddon a new chapter for the band? I mean, let's be honest, right? Like when they announced a new singer, you're kind of proving yourself in a way to the old fan base. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, there's a level of pressure that you want to, live up to people's expectation. But I knew that I was going to be good enough because I worked really hard. It's as simple as that. The day I found out that I was joining Blood Command, I started going to singing lessons. I started training. I'd go to rehearsal spaces on my own to clean up my screams. We were in lockdown during that time, so it was I wasn't able to get to Norway and do regular band practice. And because of the hard work I put in, I knew that I was going to be good enough. And if people thought otherwise, I do not care. Like, that is literally their opinion of me is their business. It's not my business. And, you know, I think the former singers were okay. To me, I have a different style, and I pride myself on what I do, and it's not, to me, it's not a comparison. So I never compared myself, and I'm not ever going to compare myself to them either. Of course, I will get compared by people because they're, you know, that's just natural.
Yeah.
But I just know that I'm good at what I do, so there's no need to do that, you know, and there's no need to worry. Like, yeah, the previous vocalists were good at what they did, and, you know, I know that I deserve to be here, and I'm better. No, I'm kidding. But you know, if you put in the work, there's no need to, feel
Absolutely.
regrets or compare yourself or anything, I find.
All right. Let's talk about the music a little bit more. All the songs address relationships. It's one of the things that, or rather, one of the topics that's least addressed by any form of extreme music, right? Because so much of extreme music is either commentary or just opinions or just fantastical in nature, right? Do you think there's a need for such topics and lyrics to be normalized as such in extreme music?
Like relationships.
Yeah, like relationships, like drama, like just basic human to human interaction, and talking about that rather than hearing about mystical wizards and
It's a good question.
The dragons.
I think that if you're writing, for me, and again, because in Pagan, majority of my songs were about relationships as well, which is another weird parallel. I think if you're just writing about something that matters to you, it doesn't matter what it is, people will then be able to relate to the music. I think if you're just writing something because it fits that genre of music, then the song's probably going to be shit, to put it nicely. That's my opinion. If you write something that you really mean and that really matters, even if it's dragons, the song, people will be able to relate to that, you know? And I think that's why I always personally go back to writing about relationships, or, you know, like somebody being, or like a dick to me and me like knowing I'm better than them or something, you know, because that's my real feelings and that's what matters to me. So if, you know, what matters to another metalhead is mystical creatures, then that's great. People will be able to find some meaning behind that. But I think, if you're writing something that that just really matters to you, that's all it should be about. I don't think there's any right or wrong, or it's just, there should just be truth behind it, in my opinion. I think that, to me, have always been my favorite songs, and songs that I'm most drawn to are songs that I find really truthful and themes that I can relate to.
Okay, point taken.
All right. So I know you mentioned like Yngwie was kind of responsible for the music and lyrics for the album, right? Overall. But one of the things that stands out also is just you have got samples bookending the album, right? If you could just kind of share some insight into what was the thought behind adding them.
Yeah, I absolutely can. It's a really good question as well, because there's an interesting story behind it. In Blood, as I mentioned earlier, with Blood Command, the Heaven's Gate movement, which for those listening at home was a religious movement created by this two people, and a lot of people refer to it as a cult. And essentially the group of people thought that when they all died, they were going to get like taken away in a spaceship, you know, and then find like heaven. They sadly all committed suicide in this house, like in these bunk beds. And Marshall Applewhite was one of the leaders of he was like the head of the movement, and he used to do these recorded sort of speeches, like he'd like had like recordings of his face, like talking about like what the, you know, what it meant to be in Heaven's Gate and so forth. And we actually had excerpts of Marshall Applewhite's real speeches at on the opening track and the outro track of Praise Armageddonism, and we asked remaining. There are some members of Heaven's Gate who are still alive, and we asked them personally if we could use the excerpt. We wanted their permission due to copyright reasons, but also out of respect.
Yeah.
And they initially said yes, that we could use the excerpts, and then they turned around and said no. I'm not sure why. And so we thought, well, to make this even more our own and to, you know, like find our own meaning behind it, we actually re-recorded the excerpts with different script over the top of it, with a voice actor who sounds like so similar to Marshall Applewhite. It's insane. Like if you compared the speeches. So yeah, I think it's, to me, I prefer that it's our own dialogue as well. Like it makes it more original, you know, and it's the idea behind it is still there, and it still works really well rhythmically, and we could put in what we wanted to say as well, which was, you know, special in the end. At the start we were pretty disappointed, and then in the end we were all happier that it turned out like that.
So that's one of the talking points that this album definitely like brings up. The other is the sax on Last Call. How much of a talking point has that become? Like I know for a fact that almost each and every review kind of mentions it. What about fans and like people who are just coming and telling you about the album or their listening experience?
Yeah.
Is that something that really stands out for them?
I think that's the last thing that they're expecting to hear. It's kind of like that song is like two songs in one song. And it's really cool that you brought that particular part up, because when I first heard that song, I remember exactly where I was. I remember, and I actually started crying because I was so excited and so proud that I got picked to sing on that song. I think it's genius. People are so like, people have such strong opinions about saxophones. I don't know why, especially music. People hate saxophones.
It's almost like pineapple on pizza.
Yeah, it really is though. People like have this weirdly strong opinion on hating saxophones. And I've always loved a saxophone when it's done right. And I just thought it was like a stroke of genius again. Like for me, it just completely, I was already sold on the record, but when I heard that song, it was signed, sealed, delivered. The intro and outro tracks have always been my favorites of Praise Armageddonism, and like it's just absolutely genius. No one else would think of that other than Ingvar. He's insane. But like an insane genius.
Okay. So you know what? We've talked so much about Praise Armageddonism. Let's play a song from the album. Which one did you identify with the most and why?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think if any of them, I would say maybe Saturday City. For me, that was a really challenging song to learn. I was really nervous about it because it had already been released with Karina's vocals, and I thought she sung the song well. I thought she sounded really nice on the song, and it made me feel worried that I was going to butcher the song and, you know, it wouldn't be as good. And that was one of the songs I worked really hard on because I wanted the new version to be something totally different and make it, Nikki, give it the Nikki flavor. So with the help of Ingvar producing me, we made it's a lot more punk. It's got more passion and power to it, I think. And it's actually probably the favorite song on the record, but from general consensus, I would say. So I think that one is the one that I'm most proud of and relate to the most. And I think that's the one that represents me really well as, the new singer of Blood Command.
Fantastic. So here it is. Here is Saturday City.
Right. And that was Nikki's version of the track. I mean, it's kind of cool that when I remember listening to it, I was just like, what's going on, right? But, just going back a year or so, right? When I was reading the story of how you joined the band, you, and I quote, say, took 1 second to accept the invitation to join Blood Command as the new singer when
Yeah.
Yngwie Anderson sent you a Facebook message
Yeah.
out of the blue. And when you go back, actually, it's 2 years, because this is actually 28th of February. So take us back to that moment, and I'm sure there's at least a couple stories about it, right?
Yeah, it's a really memorable time in my life, because I'd really hit rock bottom, like with a lot of personal stuff that had happened. My dad had just died, and then Pagan was breaking up, and I'd known, obviously, as a band, Pagan had decided to break up at the end of 2019 in September, and we already knew we'd broken up. And then we had to go do this big stadium tour with this big Australian metalcore band called the Amity Affliction. So during that tour, we were broken up, but we were still all friends. It wasn't anything. There was no drama, sadly. There's no interesting story. People just didn't want to be the band anymore. But I personally wasn't ready for the band to end. I just lost my dad. My mum had just been diagnosed with cancer, and now the band was breaking up, and it was really hard for me, because it felt, breaking up in a band, it kind of feels like a relationship breakup, like you go through a lot of emotions, and you can take things personally. And again, like, there was no animosity, but it was, I was really upset about it. And especially because there wasn't really a reason why we were breaking up, it was even harder to accept. So we'd broken up, and we announced the breakup at the start of 2020. So I think it was the 13th of January. And we announced, our final show, and everyone was really shocked, because Pagan were making quite a bit of traction in the heavy music scene. And I, at that time, just didn't want to check any of my social media. Like, my Instagram inbox was flooded with messages, and I just wasn't ready to confront it. I wasn't in denial. I just needed time off social media and not to, talk to strangers. And so, the outbox bit in Instagram, where like people who you don't follow, like their messages go there. So like typically like girls would get like dick pics in that inbox.
Yeah.
That inbox was had like hundreds of messages in it, and I didn't check it just because they were all like people who, like Pagan mainly, being like, what happened, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't check that inbox for a month. And then I got a message on Facebook, literally. So in February, being from a Norwegian person by the name of Yngwie Anderson, being like, I've been trying to contact you on Instagram, but you never respond to me. Like, kind of vibe. I have a proposition for you. I've seen the Pagans broken up. What are you doing now? And I explained that I still wanted to do music. I just wasn't 100% sure at that time. And then he asked me, would you be the new singer of Blood Command? And straight away, I remember I was sitting on my bed in my one-bedroom apartment that I was living with at the time with my ex-boyfriend. And straight away, I just said yes, without hesitation. And it's, the best decision I've ever made in my life. It was my one saving grace, joining that band during a really dark time. Right after I joined the band, my ex-boyfriend broke up with me. So then I was going through grieving my dad, going through that Pagan breakup, going through boyfriend breakup. Then my mum died. And then throughout all of that, I had Blood Command. So Praise Armageddonism to me was my escape. It was the one thing I had during that time to not think about the hard stuff that was going on in my life. It was my one happy place. So it's really, there's a lot more meaning behind that album to me than it just being, a record. It's a really special thing to me.
Wow. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
sharing
for
that. I
sharing
mean,
Of
that.
like it
course,
takes a
yeah.
lot, and I I mean, like even though it's been a couple of years, I could totally like kind of understand there. But okay, just to shift the tone slightly from that,
Yeah.
uh, after
From
saying yes in 1 second, I was looking at the band promos. Did you have to then run out and buy, I don't know, an Adidas tracksuit when you joined the band?
I borrowed a lot of Adidas stuff from a friend. I had to buy the balaclava, but luckily I've always liked Adidas as well. So I had a few things already, but yes, I did. I had to borrow some Adidas from a friend. Very good question. And like, it was really strange as well because not many people guessed that it was me. I think just because they thought, of course it wouldn't be an Australian person. Some people were really clever though, and they got it right away. But yeah, that was really a crazy time because I knew that I joined this new band and people were constantly asking me like, what are you doing? And I just couldn't tell anybody. So it was like a very strange feeling, very strange time in my life. So the day that we announced it, we also released a villain's monologue on that day, and it was like one of the best days of my life. Like it went so much better than any of us anticipated, and people were just really happy with, the new lineup. And I think I am the right fit for the band,
Yeah, yeah.
And people thought that too, which was a really nice, reassuring thing that, the fans agreed that it was the right fit.
That it is. And obviously that to be the right fit, it's taken a lot of work. I mean, we talked a little bit about the production process and you getting remotely recorded in Australia, being directed by Ingve right from Norway. Was this the first time you've recorded remotely as such?
Yeah, I didn't even know how to do it. And I was really nervous about it because initially we were trying to get me over to Norway
Mm-hmm.
to record the album, and we couldn't. I couldn't get over there, especially Australia, and I was in Melbourne, which ended up being the
Yeah.
longest lockdown
Yeah.
city in the entire world. So I couldn't get out of Australia, and I was actually granted a travel exemption through the
Mm-hmm.
help of this really great organisation in Australia called Sounds Australia. They help musicians internationally. So I was really grateful. I was given an exemption due to, business reasons because I was meant to be going on the Caval tour. But at the time, we couldn't get me over there. So we had to think of a solution. And what we did is we actually said, because I was pretty nervous about singing the clean vocal songs because I'd really only been a screaming vocalist prior to Blood Command. So I said, can we do a song that I feel most comfortable with? Like, why don't we do a villain's monologue? And we'll just do it as a test. I've got this great engineer in Melbourne. A friend of mine has told me he's worked with bands internationally, like in the same way, like, doing the slide
Yeah.
sing. And he's actually a friend of mine too. He's really great. His name's Callan Orr, and he's recorded a lot of really big artists. And he said yes to doing it. And it was the funny thing about it is that A Villain's Monologue was actually mine and Ingvar's least favorite song on the record. We just wanted to record it first because, we just wanted to give it a go. And I knew I'd be able to record it pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And we recorded it, and the process went so well. And the final result, like of A Villain's Monologue, the song sounded so good, especially like not throwing shade at everybody, but if you heard the original, it was really a different song. So when we heard this, we were like, oh my God, like we can do this. And it was really exciting because we were both so, down and out for months, and like knowing that I couldn't get to Norway. So we locked in 5 days or like maybe 7 days in a row or something. And Callan, his studio, like the vocal booth is in an apartment block. So he could only work from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. So it meant Ingvar had to do 2 a.m. till 10 a.m. every day. But, so other than the time zone differences and, you know, like obviously it's better to be in the same country, in the same room, of course, but under the circumstances, it was a pretty good situation. And it's pretty amazing that it worked because we didn't know if it was going to work or not.
Yeah. So, I mean, given how easy it has become to stay connected in today's world, and given that so many different bands seem to be following this route where it's not like it's very common these days to have a global band as such, right? So many people are doing it. It's still curious you said that it's still better to be able to do this in person, even though I think you've enjoyed the process of remote working.
Yeah.
Why does one really take that much more precedence over the other?
For me personally, yes. A lot of it, like, because when you're working remotely, you know, like the producer, for example, this is my personal experience, you know, they might forget that you need to stop and have a break for half an hour, or you need to sit down, or you need to stop for 2 minutes. You know, when you're working on opposite sides of the world, you don't have that luxury. I couldn't just take an hour-long break because Ingvar was awake at 5 a.m. You know, like I had to push through. So it was really exhausting. Like I was doing 8-hour sessions, and it was not ideal. Like I wouldn't do it again. There's no way. We had to do it, and I'm glad we did it, and it worked well. But it's working in a studio with a producer is just a different game. You know, like because you're together as well. Like you feed off each other's energy too. Like it can be. And as I said, like while it worked very well, it's just it is harder as well, even to take feedback. Like sometimes you might not understand what they mean, or like it just takes longer. And then for him even to get the like my vocals back, so he could like listen back to like, you know, this line in this song, that would take, you know, a minute to transfer it over. Like you can't just press a space bar and him hear it properly, because if he was just listening through the computer, you know, like just things like that. But
lag issues.
Yeah, exactly. So we both wouldn't do it like that again, unless we get, you know,
unless the world goes
down somewhere again. But it was pretty amazing that it worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I'm also thinking of like body cues, right? Like you just cannot pick up on that.
Exactly.
In there,
exactly.
like, and especially like when especially both are at two different ends of the spectrum. Like someone's up in the middle of the day, in the night, and you're up in the middle of the day. And but wait, hang on. Since I don't know this part, I have to ask: did you all have video on, or it was just audio? Like he was connected via Skype on audio?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was a video, like a Skype video, but because I was in a vocal booth, like Callum, the engineer, could see Ingvar, but I could just hear Ingvar in my headphones with Callum. So
that doesn't make it.
It was almost like Ingvar was just in the next room with Callum some of the time, but then some of the time he obviously wasn't there, because if I had to get a drink of water or something, he'd just be like, "Oh, go again." And, you know, they're like, "Oh, I can't," like, you know, just even communication like that could be difficult. Whereas if you're in the studio together, you're just like, "I'm getting water," and just walk out, or, you know, you might just like half an hour. So you didn't have the luxury of that, you know, that kind of flexibility. But, yeah, it's what modern technology can do is amazing, and I'm very proud of what we achieved. I just definitely wouldn't do it like that again if I
for sure.
Thankfully, I don't think we need to now that I live in Norway.
Exactly. So to solve the problem for good, you moved to Norway. How has
Exactly.
how has the move to Bergen been? What's it like to be an Australian in Norway?
It's been a huge change. It was, it's the best decision I've made. I don't have any regrets, and I'm very
Hmm.
proud of myself for doing it. But it's been hard. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I'm so lucky. I'm so privileged. I, get to live in Norway. My father was Slovenian, so I'm
Hmm.
a dual citizen of Australia and Slovenia. So it's been a lot easier for me to live here too because I don't need to go through visa stuff.
Yeah.
But in saying that, packing up your whole life, um, I'm in my 30s and I had to sell over half my wardrobe and give all my things away and had to come with one suitcase. It's been pretty eye-opening experience, and coming to a country where I don't speak Norwegian.
Hmm.
Majority of people speak English, and everyone's lovely and everything like that. It's just things you learn moving countries. You just learn it as you go. You can't ever anticipate what it's going to be like. So
Hmm.
it's been a very big change. It's been a lot
Hmm.
of adapting, but all in all, it's been really good.
Yeah. I
All
mean,
right.
finally, at the end of the day, there's only that many YouTube videos or whatever that you can watch to
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
get like the thing, right? Like being there
Yeah.
is finally the real
I
thing.
found that the best thing to do is to talk to people who've also moved
Hmm.
country
Yeah.
because they totally like it makes me feel really normal for sometimes being like, "Oh, I feel really stressed and I don't know why," and they'll be like, "So did I." Like you can really relate to somebody who's done the same thing. I think
Hmm.
people who haven't done it may find it a bit hard to relate to or understand how it can be very stressful. But all in all, I've been really lucky, and I've had a lot of support from my band and my boyfriend who is Norwegian and my twin sister from Australia. She helped me so much. She's living in Australia, and that's probably been the hardest thing for me, just being apart from her. But other than that, it's been amazing. I love it here, and I'm gonna be here permanently.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
mean, in my experience, I've seen like the expat groups that you have in there also are useful. Just kind of like what you said, right? Like everyone kind of experiences the same thing, but at different times. So yeah, that's what I've seen at least.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You were going to say something. Anish.
No, nothing. I'm just moving on because I have another question about living in Norway, but it's slightly coming from a different perspective. Like, or rather, I'm going to arrive at the question from a slightly convoluted perspective, which is when I first heard Blood Command, and this wasn't the first album previously, right? I couldn't believe that it was a Norwegian band because this is energetic music. It's not something I associate with Norway or music coming out of Norway as such, because Norway doesn't really give off a summer vibe to me,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, putting that as the context, living in Norway, there are so many preconceived notions that I already have about it, and especially talking to other musicians from Norway, talking to or hearing sports people coming out of Norway, etc. Did you have any preconceived notions about Norway, which like do any of them hold true anymore?
Um.
Like I'm expecting everybody to be just serious and brooding all the time and to have a really dry sense of humor all the time.
Yeah. I think you're pretty on the money with Bergen people. Bergen people can be pretty dry. I'm pretty extroverted and I've got a very bubbly personality, so I think I bring that out of people. So I don't notice it as much if they are quieter, like because I'm pretty good at talking to people. But I'd been, as I mentioned earlier in our chat, I'd actually been to Norway in 2011. So
Hmm.
I already knew what to expect to an extent. Obviously, visiting here for 3 weeks,
Yeah, like
very
as a
different.
tourist versus living is so different.
Yeah, it's for me, like when I first heard Blood Command, I actually thought it was so not maybe not Norwegian specifically, but it's so Scandinavian sounding. Like it's got that Scandi rock thing to like nailed to perfection. Like, you know, like the hooky choruses and the synths and the, you know, harmonies and like all that. I just found it really Scandinavian, and that I love that. Like I love the cheesy aspect of it
Mm-hmm.
in the most positive way. But yeah, I think it's interesting here because people in Norway generally, they're not as like into the black metal thing as you know,
As advertised.
as people might think.
Yeah.
Obviously there's black metal artists from here. Some of them I know, but in Bergen specifically, there's a thing. There's like a really famous festival called Beyond the Gates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just like a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah. And like when that is on, the whole city, I've never seen more like leather jackets with patches all over them in my life.
Top Spain people.
You know, and every like there's so many tourists, and that's fantastic for Bergen because how great that it opens up this tourism. But like Bergen locals, even people who are into metal music, they're all like, oh, the Black Packers are here. Like they have like a bit of a joke about
Black
it.
Packers.
Yeah. And I think it's so funny because it is such a cliche that people think Norway is this place where like all these people walk around with corpse paint, there's forests everywhere. And, you know, there is forests everywhere, but it's such beautiful scenery. For me, it doesn't make me feel negative. It makes me feel happy. I'm like, it's like magical, like elf land with like gingerbread houses everywhere. That's why I see it. But when I went for the very first time I came here in 2011, I had the same idea though. I thought, oh, this is going to be like so dark and like all these like metal heads everywhere. But it's Norway's definitely not like that at all.
Cool. Gives me more reasons to go and visit.
Yeah.
Okay, just to kind of wrap up, right? I noticed that you guys are doing a lot of touring in the coming months, but also that you guys are touring Australia and you're part of the festival happening there in December. So what are you looking forward to the most? I mean, other than being at home, right?
I'm so excited for the guys in my band to come to Australia, especially Melbourne. I like Sydney and I love Brisbane, but Melbourne is really a special place when it comes to like a music city, and like culturally, like the bars and the food, and you know, like coming from Bergen to Melbourne, they're gonna just be so amazed. Like it's like chalk and cheese. And I think that they're just gonna love it. And you know, that's a really special thing that we're doing those shows, because I obviously the band deserves to get something like that with or without me in the band, but we never would have been given that. Well, it's less likely we would have been given that opportunity if I wasn't in the band. The promoter of the festival was aware of Pagan and was a fan, and therefore found out about Blood Command that way. So it makes me feel really proud that another reason why I feel really proud that I've joined the band, that it's opened up doors, you know, just like they have for me. You know, we've opened up doors for each other, and this is one of the things that I think is just going to be a game changer. Australia is going to love Blood Command. They're not even ready for how cool it's going to be. And I'm so excited for the guys to see Australia, and I hope we get some like 37-degree days. Honestly,
who knows, right? They might want to relocate at the end of that tour. It's like, it's especially considering it's in December, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's really nice that we get to escape the winter, like the Norwegian winter. So they're all so excited though, and we've all said we've got to all get a pair of Adidas shorts before we go, because we're worried about it being too hot playing outdoor festivals.
Are you prepping them for Vegemite?
Oh, I've got to actually, I should do a list of Australian things and get them to eat them. They did ask me one thing. They said, can we have can we do shrimps on the barbie? Even though Australians don't call them shrimps, we call them prawns.
Yeah.
Taco shrimp on the barbie, and that is the quintessential Australian summer thing to do. So I said, well, definitely maybe my auntie's house or something, we're going to do shrimps on the barbie so they can all at least experience that.
Cool. Lots of
Yeah.
things to look forward to. What seems to be
Yeah.
an exciting times coming ahead for you and for Blood Command. So yeah, all the best with all of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It's been great chatting with you. And I'm looking up the festival dates. It's not that far away from India. So fingers crossed.
You should come.
Yeah. if only Melbourne was not like that much further. Right?
I know.
Yeah. Airfare prices. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Exactly.
Although it's crazy, like there was at one point, flights to Sydney and Melbourne were not that expensive because from India, the cheapest flight is to Perth.
Yeah.
Of
But
course.
then the same amount of airfare is from Perth to Melbourne or
Melbourne.
Sydney.
It's cheaper to go from Melbourne to like Bali than it is to Perth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Same.
Oh,
Yeah.
actually, that's not a bad idea. Bali and then
Yeah, that would be okay. That's your tour itinerary for the early December. There you go.
Things that we need to start planning. Oh well.
It was so nice to talk to both of you. Thank you for having me.
Likewise. Gentlemen, ladies, whoever's listening. Why don't you guys start planning your December itineraries? It's not that far away. We're in the second half of the year already. If you've got some interesting things that you have already planned or are planning and you'd like to let us know what they are, you can do so at honsapod.com or on Twitter at honsapod. As always, I'm on Twitter at Asmoani.
I'm at Trend Crusher.
And this was Horns Up.
Horns up, guys.